If you're a note taker, I want you to write this down. Here's what he said. And this is actually the title of the book by Harvey Mackay. This is also a very old proverb, but I want you to write this down. He said, you got to dig your well before you're thirsty. I'm going to say that again. You've got to dig your well before you're thirsty. You see, here's what I discovered about life. Life is going to hit you with some things that you didn't anticipate. Life is going to throw some things at you that maybe perhaps you didn't quite anticipate was going to come your way. And in those moments, you don't want to be one of those people that goes through life simply responding and reacting to the things that happen. Because here's what I know. I know some people who, unfortunately, they go through life simply reacting and responding to the challenges of life. And unfortunately, if you're going through life simply reacting and responding, unfortunately, oftentimes you're not in a mental place where you can create. You're not in a mental place where you can make things happen. You're not in a mental place where you can demand and create the kind of life that you deserve, the kind of life that you want. Rather, you're going through life simply putting out fires, simply trying to make things happen. And so what we've got to learn to do is to dig your well before you're thirsty. In other words, you've got to live a life and build a type of network that when you find yourself in difficult times, that when you find yourself in the midst of the challenge, that you have already prepared. That's why I love to tell people, you've got to train for the trial that you have not yet had. Write that down. You've got to train for the trial that you've not yet had. And so I remember, this was back in December of 2004. I had just left corporate America. I remember being so excited about the possibilities, about pursuing my goals and my dreams of becoming an entrepreneur. I felt liberated, and I had finally built up some courage to step out on my own. And many of you have heard me share the story that, unfortunately, shortly after me leaving corporate America, I decided to make a significant investment. I took about 80% of everything that I had saved up, and I invested in a real estate deal out in Costa Rica. And unfortunately, things went terribly wrong. Unfortunately, I lost all of my money. And let me tell you something. Here's what happened very quickly. I discovered that when you save money up, and maybe some of you can relate to this, when you save money, if you find yourself in a situation in which you deplete those funds and you don't have any new income coming in, you'll find that that's a very uncomfortable situation. What you'll find is that your savings can be depleted very fast when you're living off of it and there's no other income coming in. And so let me just say that my well went dry. Let me just also say that I became very thirsty. I was thirsty for an opportunity. I was thirsty to be able to find my footing again. I was thirsty to be able to get back in my comfort zone. And so what I say to you is you've got to dig your well before you're thirsty. And you say, well, Andy, what does that mean? What it means is that you put in the work right now to develop the things that are necessary to position you so that when crisis is happening in your life, when things happen in your life, you won't find yourself simply trying to tread water. You won't find yourself struggling. You won't find yourself simply reacting. But no, you would have created relationships and cultivated relationships in which you can make phone calls and be able to tell somebody, hey, look, this is what happened to me. And they'll be able to make a phone call on your behalf, and you'll be able to go ahead and very smoothly be able to change positions. You want to create passive and multiple streams of income so that if your primary source of income goes out, you won't find yourself in a situation in which you're struggling. You're trying to figure out how you're going to pay your bills. You're trying to figure out how you're going to keep your lights on. You're trying to figure out how you're going to sustain your household. Statistics say that 61% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. As a matter of fact, less than 50% of Americans even have 1 month's worth of pay saved up. And so what it means is that a majority of people are simply reacting in the face of a crisis. They're reacting if they get laid off from their jobs. They're reacting if the transmission goes out in their car. They're reacting if they find themselves in a situation, unfortunately, where the company has decided to downsize. They're reacting if unfortunately they made an investment and they lost the money because unfortunately they haven't saved up an emergency fund. They haven't positioned themselves. So what I'm saying is right now, while you've got some firm footing, right now, while you've got a level of clarity, I just want to be able to tell you that this is the time right now that you want to dig your well. You want to dig your well right now. You want to dig your well before you're thirsty. So you don't want to wait for the crisis. You don't want to wait till you find yourself in a position in which you're trying to figure things out. No. You want to dig your well right now. So I want you to think about what is it that you can do right now to start digging your well. What is it that you can do right now to start cultivating relationships, the kind of relationships that are solid relationships, the ones that you can lean on in moments of despair, the ones that you can lean on when life catches you by the blind side. What are the wells that you can build right now that you'll be able to create a passive additional stream of income? That if you find yourself in a situation, unfortunately, where maybe perhaps that your primary source of income gets taken away, if maybe perhaps something happens that you didn't anticipate. And so I just want to leave you with that. I want you to think about that. I want to make sure you write that down. And I want you to start thinking about how can you start digging your well right now, before you're thirsty, before the crisis hits, before you find yourself in a situation, so that you're not going through life like the majority of Americans and simply reacting to the fact that your income has been reduced, reacting to the fact that you've been let go from your job, reacting to the fact that you've got an unexpected expense, reacting to the fact that there's been changes and shifts and changes in your economy, reacting to what's happening in your market, reacting to what your competition is doing. No, this is the time to start digging your well. This is the time to start positioning yourself so that you can make some things happen. And so that's the first thing that I want to share with you. And I want to make sure that you wrote that down. You've got to dig your well before you're thirsty. Right now, this is the time that you start making things happen. Don't go through life like most people, simply reacting and responding to life. Now, here's the other thing that I want you to write down. And here's one of the things that's really important. And this is a lesson that I had to learn. As a matter of fact, it was, my wife actually taught me this lesson. Because, see, I don't know if you're anything like me, but one of the things that I've always tried to do is, I've always tried to be a perfectionist. And so I always want things to be perfect. And so this is one of those things that I start off, what my wife, the amazing thing about her is she's a quick starter. But if we both have the same idea, I'll still be planning. I still be strategizing on making sure that everything is perfect. And while I'm still planning, while I'm still strategizing, she would have already executed. She would have already had it done. And so here's one of the things that, we were meeting up with one of our friends and we were having a conversation. And in the midst of our conversation, what happened is I was telling this person that we're meeting up with that when we are in our home studio and we're shooting videos, and especially some of you know we recently had our event. And when we're in our home studio and we're shooting these videos, when we're shooting a video together, my wife, one take, it only literally takes her one take and she's done. It's over. It's a wrap. I mean, she's just like, turn the camera on. What are we going to say? Boom, boom, boom. And she's done. Whereas me, I'll go ahead and do it, but then I want to do it over again. I want to make sure it's perfect. There's something else I wanted to add. There's something different that I wanted to say. There's something that I wanted to emphasize. There's something else that I wanted to add on. What I've come to the realization is in those moments, and what I love is that we were having this conversation with one of our mutual friends, and while we were in the midst of this conversation with a mutual friend, and I was sharing this story about how my wife is one take. That's her nickname. We call her one take when it's time to shoot the videos. And then she looked over, and here's what she says. She says, "You know what? It hasn't always been like that." And I said, well, wait a second. What do you mean it hasn't always been like that? As long as I've known you, you knock out things just one time. 1, 2, 3. She says, listen, it wasn't always like that. And I said, well, what do you mean? She says, well, it wasn't always like that. And she said, Andy, the reason why, she said, let me tell you, there used to be a time when I used to be doing the videos. There used to be a time that when I did those videos, I would do them over and over and over again. I would want to add another word to what I just said. I would want to say something differently, or I didn't like the way my hair looked at that moment, or I didn't like the way that the angle in which I was standing in front of the camera. I just didn't like the way things were happening. And I said, well, what changed? What changed? And she said, what changed for me is when I came to a realization that done is better than perfect. I want you to write that down. Done is better than perfect. You see, some of us right now, we have goals and dreams, things that we're working on, things that we're looking to make happen. And while we're in the midst of trying to make this thing happen, we want everything to be perfect. But unfortunately, it's not always going to be perfect. It's not going to happen like that. That this book you're trying to write, that done is better than perfect. Get it done. This business that you're trying to start, you're trying to strategize. You're trying to, make sure the business plan is right. You're trying to make sure that everything is right. But let me remind you, done is better than perfect. This website that you're trying to get up, you're trying to make sure that the logo is perfect. You're trying to make sure that the flow is perfect. You're trying to make sure that all the content is perfect. But let me remind you that done is better than perfect. And there's something that you may have been working on, you've been meaning to work on, but unfortunately, you just haven't been able to get it done. And why? Because you've been pursuing perfection. And so what I've discovered is that oftentimes perfection, the pursuit of perfection, will leave you in a place of despair. The pursuit of perfection will leave you in a place in which, unfortunately, you're not making things happen. It'll leave you in a place where, unfortunately, you're not producing, where, unfortunately, your business does not grow, where, unfortunately, you don't launch your book, where, unfortunately, you don't take your business off the ground, where, unfortunately, you're not making things happen. And so let me remind you, and I want to make sure you write this down, that done is better than perfect. And so let's get it done. That's why Benjamin Franklin said that well done is better than well said. You see, don't simply talk about it, make it happen. Don't talk about the things that you want to do. Don't sit there and deliberate and talk about all the things that you got to overcome, all the things that you want to do, that you should do, but rather just simply make it happen. Get it done. And let me remind you right now that done is better than perfect. And so this is the time right now for you to start focusing on getting things done. Understand that it's not always going to be perfect. Understand that things aren't necessarily always going to work out exactly the way that you want it to work out. And so it's going to be essential for you to get past simply trying to make it perfect, but rather for you to emphasize the importance of getting it done. So what is it that you're working on right now that you have been trying to make perfect? What is it that you've been working on that you keep going over and over again? And unfortunately, you haven't released it out into the world. You haven't positioned this thing. You haven't gotten this business off the ground. You haven't, unfortunately, released this thing that you've been working on. You've been holding down your gift. You haven't been practicing and doing the things because you're so busy trying to make everything perfect. You've been hesitating about, applying for this new career, this new job, because you're so busy playing with your resume and trying to make sure everything is perfect. But let me tell you that as you're sitting there trying to make sure everything's perfect, somebody else is getting it done. And so why not allow that somebody else to be you? And so I want you to write that down, that done is better than perfect. So the first thing I ask you to write down, of course, is that you want to dig your well before you're thirsty. That some things are going to happen in life, some things that you didn't anticipate. And in those moments, you want to know that you've created a well. You want to know that you've created relationships. You want to know that you have resources that you can tap into. You want to know that you've created some passive residual income. So if something happens to your primary income, that you're not running around frantically and simply reacting to life like most people, but that rather you have a well, someplace that you can go to, a reservoir, resources, things that you can draw from. Remember that you want to dig your well before you're thirsty. And of course, the second thing that I shared with you is what? Is that done is better than perfect. And so, yes, it's okay for you to pursue excellence, but do not pursue perfection, because oftentimes in the pursuit of perfection, we don't get things done. And so this is the time right now to start getting things done. This is the time right now to start creating this thing that you've been wanting to do. This is the time to release the book. This is the time to start the business. This is the time to start taking things to the next level. And then finally, if you're a note taker, I want you to write this down. If it doesn't challenge you, then it doesn't change you. Yeah, I want you to write that down. If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. You see, many of us are seeking change. We are seeking change in our business. We are seeking change in our lives. We are seeking change in our relationships. We are seeking change in pursuit of everything that we're looking to do. But unfortunately, in pursuit of the change, we're trying to avoid the challenge. But unfortunately, let me just tell you, you can't have the change if you're not willing to accept the challenge. And so what I need you to understand is oftentimes your most significant change is going to happen in the midst of the challenge. And so there's going to be some challenges in life. And what I'm saying to you is don't avoid the challenge. You've got to embrace the challenge. You've got to step through the challenge. You've got to grow through the challenge, because it's those challenges that oftentimes is going to allow you to change and become a stronger person. It's going to allow you to change and become a better businessman or a better businesswoman. It's going to allow you to change and become a better father, a better mother, a better husband, a better wife. It's going to allow you to change and be able to have a better perspective and make things happen. And so what I can tell you right now is when I look back at my life, I think about those moments that I had to deal with some serious challenges. Like when I lost that money that I invested when I first left corporate America. I had to embrace a serious challenge when I made the mistake of co-signing on a student loan. And after co-signing on a student loan, I inherited a $40,000 student loan. Let me tell you something. That was a challenge. But oftentimes what we've got to learn to do is oftentimes when we're dealing with a challenge, understand that it's in the midst of the challenge that we're going to have our greatest changes. And oftentimes those changes are going to be for good. I'll never forget this, investing in a company in which I thought that this company was going to, produce an extraordinary return, only to find myself in a situation where I was facing losing thousands of dollars as a result of this investment. And let me just tell you, that was a challenge. But every single one of those challenges led to a significant change. You see, I learned and discovered that failure is not a title, but rather failure is a one-time event. And when you fail at something, it doesn't mean that you are a failure. What it simply means is that is an event. That is an episode. That is something that happened that you can push through. You see, what I discovered is that you've got to let go or be dragged. You see, when I allowed myself to be frustrated every time I had to make payments on that student loan and replaying what was happening, I realized it wasn't serving me and I had to let go of the situation. And so what I discovered is that sometimes in life you've got to let go or be dragged. You see, what I also learned is that you've got to take full ownership of anything that's going on in your life. Why? Because you cannot change something that you do not own. And so you can only change something once you've taken full ownership of it. And so what I want to tell you is this: if it doesn't challenge you, then it doesn't change you. And so I want you to think about a challenge that you're facing right now, that maybe perhaps you've been walking away from. Maybe perhaps you didn't think in a million years that you would have to deal with or face this challenge. I want to remind you right now, I want to make sure that you're aware of this, that if it doesn't challenge you, then it doesn't change you. And so I'm telling you, I love getting some golden nuggets from life. I love those one-liners. I love those things that allows to create significant impact. And I want to rehash on these things because I want to make sure that you get these, because these are important principles. These are principles that I believe that you could apply to your life that's going to create extraordinary impact in your life and allow you to just be able to change the trajectory and the outcome and the way that you look at life. You know, Wayne Dyer says when you change the way you look at things, then the things you look at change. And so I want to remind you of this, that number one, you want to dig your well before you're thirsty. Don't wait for things to happen in life and at that point that you begin to react. No, but rather put in the work right now. Cultivate the relationships right now. Create the multiple streams of income right now. Create the emergency fund right now. Do the things that are required right now. Get uncomfortable right now. Have a long-term perspective and dig your well right now before you're thirsty, so that when things happen in life, you're not finding yourself in a situation where you're simply reacting. And then, of course, the second thing is that I shared with all of you, which is so critical, is that done is better than perfect. Stop trying to pursue perfection. Rather, pursue getting it done. Make it happen. Make things happen. Get the business off the ground. Get the business launched. Take things to the next level. The things you've been talking about, let's make it happen. Why? Because done is better than perfect. And stop trying to pursue perfection. I had to learn that. Listen, my wife taught me that lesson. It's a powerful lesson. And you've got to learn to do it. If you want to be a change maker, if you want to make things happen, if you want to have fast growth and not just be simply talking about the same thing over and over over again. Understand this, that done is better than perfect. And finally, let me tell you something, that if it doesn't challenge you, then it doesn't change you. And those who are looking for change must be willing to embrace the challenge. And unfortunately, if you're looking for a change in your finances or a change in your business or a change in your life, you cannot have that change if you're going through life always avoiding the challenge. Why? Because oftentimes the challenge leads to the change. And if it does not challenge you, then most often it will not change you. And so it's important that right now you embrace the challenges that are going on in your life, that you be willing to step outside of your comfort zone. That's why Brian Tracy said that your comfort zone is a danger zone. Why? Because no growth happens there. You can't go to the next level there. That's why Donald Trump said that, you know what? He says that your greater self is in direct opposition of your comfort zone. Right? You can't establish your greater self. You can't get to the next level if you're operating within your comfort zone. It's time to step out. And right now is the time right now to start facing the challenges, because ultimately those challenges are going to lead to the changes. And so that's what I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on these three things. I want you to write them down. I want you to reflect, and I want you to think about how you could apply these principles to your life to dig your well before you're thirsty. How do you apply the principle of your life that done is better than perfect? How do you apply the principle to your life that if it doesn't challenge you, then it doesn't change you? What is it that you can do right now in your personal life that's going to help you to go to the next level? And so I hope that you can take these things to heart. Let me tell you, these are principles that I realize that I'm going to apply to my life on a continual basis. And you know, sometimes you hear things, but then sometimes you just got to hear it again and be at a different place mentally and have a little more experiences under your belt, have been touched by life a little more. And all of a sudden these quotes and these sayings, they take on new meaning. They begin to transform and they mean different things to you. And so I want you to take these things to heart, and I want you to apply them to your lives and understand that it's going to be necessary if you're looking to take your life to the next level. Let me just say, this has been Andy Henriquez reminding you to always show up for your life. Because if you don't, ladies and gentlemen, no one else will.
Yes, yes.